New Zealand Prime Minister Hipkins has insisted the Chinese dictator Xi Jinping is not a dictator. Hipkins made the claim ahead of his official trip to the dictator's country this week. The Kiwi Prime Minister was asked on Thursday if he agreed with US President Joe Biden that the Chinese communist dictatorship was a communist dictatorship.
No, and the form of government that China has is a matter for the Chinese people.
Hipkins then immediately checked his phone to ensure the promised 5,000 points had been added to his social credit score. Hipkins insisted the Chinese people could always choose not to live under an evil, oppressive, totalitarian dictatorship if they wanted to. After all, it wasn't as though an evil, oppressive, totalitarian dictatorship was run by, a dictator.
If they wanted to change their system of government, then that would be a matter for them.
Of course, all they had to do was tick one of the non-existent alternatives to Xi Jinping on the ballot paper at the next election. Failing that, they could stand in front of Chinese tanks and calmly but firmly explain they were sick of being surveilled, oppressed, jailed and killed by the regime before being run down by Chinese tanks. But that, of course, was entirely a matter for the Chinese people, Hipkins said. Prime Minister Hipkins said he looked forward to receiving a pat on the head and maybe a biscuit from Xi Jinping when he met with the dictator to be given his next set of instructions later this week. The Kiwi Prime Minister denied that his comments were made in order to placate a dictator who could easily destroy New Zealand's economy if angered by being referred to as a dictator. This was purely coincidental, Hipkins said. Asked to explain how it was that Xi Jinping was president for life but not a dictator, Mr Hipkins said Xi Jinping was just, very, very popular. Hipkins said similarly popular politicians included, Stalin, Lenin, Hitler, Mao and Dan Andrews. Meanwhile, Hipkins said he greatly admired the free and fair system of government in China, which he hoped to emulate in New Zealand, just as soon as dictator Jacinda Ardern has finished her work at the United Nations, figuring out a way to dictate what people can and cannot say online. Jacinda Ardern, Hipkins' predecessor, famously told her countrymen during the COVID pandemic that the New Zealand Labor government was the nation's single source of truth.
Instead, I want to send a clear message to the New Zealand public. We will share with you the most up-to-date information daily. You can trust us as a source of that information.
Ardern then went on to say, otherwise dismiss anything else. We will continue to be your single source of truth. It was the sort of absolutism that a dictator like Xi Jinping would have been proud of. If he was a dictator. But of course, Xi Jinping is not a dictator, and Ardern was not a communist shrill, and Hipkins is not a complete coward. And as it turns out, Joe Biden is not completely wrong all the time.